This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform helping you succeed online.
Hey everyone, so this is the Galaxy S26 Ultra, the best phone from Samsung here in 2026, and we're going to compare it to last year's Galaxy S25 Ultra. So we're going to see what a one-year leap in camera improvement looks like. And so they both use a very similar camera setup. They both have a 200 megapixel main camera, although the S26 Ultra has a slightly wider aperture this year. They both have 3 and 5x telephoto cameras. The 3x telephoto camera on the S26 Ultra is a slightly smaller sensor for whatever reason this year. And the 5x telephoto sensor on the S26 Ultra also has a slightly wider aperture as well. They both have the same ultra-wide camera and selfie sensors. And the one thing to note here is that the telephoto cameras on the S26 Ultra can't get as close, so they don't have as good of a minimum focusing distance as last year's S25 Ultra. So if you like taking macro photos with the telephoto cameras like I do, you might have a better experience actually with last year's Galaxy S25 Ultra, but I'm going to show you some camera samples so you can judge for yourself. And the other thing to note is that you can shoot and log video on both, but the S26 Ultra supports a new APV codec that Samsung co-developed with Qualcomm, and this allows you supposedly to have higher quality video at lower file sizes. And the log video is a little bit more flexible in the S26 Ultra in that you can use it in the standard video mode, so you're not confined to the Pro mode. The advantage there is that you can switch between the lenses while recording in log video on the S26 Ultra, while you're confined to the Pro mode there on the S25 when you're shooting in log, and you cannot switch between the lenses. So a little bit more flexibility for you Pro users who want to use log video on the S26 Ultra. And here's a quick portrait video sample here indoors from the main cameras. They're both set to a 7 out of 7, so you should be seeing this artificial background blur, which you can lower if you want to. But I just ran through all the camera specs and went through some of the main differences in the camera systems. But all that really matters is how the photos and videos actually look, what kind of quality do they really produce. And so like I always do, I'm going to show you a bunch of photos and videos in both good and low light conditions to help you decide which of these two camera systems are best for your smartphone camera needs, and if upgrading from the S25 Ultra to the S26 Ultra might be worth it, or if you have an older model, if the S26 Ultra lives up to your expectations. So go ahead and take a look at all the photos and videos and let me know what you think. Hey everyone, so just a quick break from the video to mention that if you've been thinking about creating your own personal or business website to help centralize your online content or maybe promote your portfolio, then today's sponsor Squarespace definitely has you covered and can get you up and running within minutes.
With Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform, creating your personal website is quick and easy. Just sign up for a free trial and use their Blueprint AI website builder, or select from a library of templates to get up and running in minutes. Creating a photo gallery is quick and easy. Just add a new page and select from several predefined layouts. Then edit the gallery with your information, upload your images and optional descriptions, and enable the lightbox option to allow visitors to view larger images in a carousel.
And when you're ready to publish your website, go to squarespace.com/grantlikestech for 10% off your first domain or website. I'd like to thank Squarespace again for sponsoring today's video, which helps me bring you more content like this. Now let's get back to the video.
Quick break to show you the minimum focus distance of the telephoto cameras. I start out close to the subject and back away until it's in focus. Maybe not the best focus here, but you get the idea. And the larger sensor on the S25 Ultra enables you to get a little bit closer, as well as more of a natural, shallower depth of field, so more of a background blur on the larger sensor of the S25 Ultra, as you can see here. And here on the 5x telephoto lens, although the S26 Ultra has the wider aperture, the S25 Ultra can actually focus up closer to the subject, so it's going to have more of a natural or shallower depth of field than the wider aperture on the S26 Ultra, as you can see here. Alright, so this is a video test of the rear cameras of the Galaxy S26 Ultra and S25 Ultra. As you can see, they both are actively recording from the rear-facing cameras. And we are starting out with the ultra-wide-angle cameras on each at 4K 60 frames per second. So I'm just going to pan around here to give you a side-by-side view of how the ultra-wide-angle cameras compare here in this particular setting. Fairly sunny, slightly overcast, a lot of blues, greens, and that red shed there. So all the colors that you might want to compare. See how it's handling the shadows in the trees and how it kind of handles for the exposure readjustment as you come back up into the sunny sky. But let's go ahead and move into the main cameras. So on the S26, now on the S25. So there you go, side by side main cameras on both phones. I'll just do the same thing, pan around to get a side by side view of how the cameras perform and how everything looks. We'll pan up back into the sky and we'll move over here to the right and we'll test zoom out on that cell tower. So both have the same dual telephoto lenses, so 3x telephoto on the S26 and same 3x telephoto here on the S25, although it is a slightly smaller sensor on the S26 this year for whatever reason. S26 5x telephoto, slightly wider aperture than the 5x telephoto here on the S25 Ultra, but that's how they compare here. Both very steady right now. And we'll go into the max 25x zoom on the S26, and you got a max 20x zoom here on the S25. So both looking very clear, slightly more reach on the S26. We'll back them both out, so 1x on the X25 and on the S26. And we'll try to test autofocus on the post with the S26 Ultra first. So there you go, nice and snappy autofocus. And pay attention to the shallow depth of field or the background blur here on the S26. It's a slightly wider aperture, so it should be looking a little bit more blurry in the background than the S25 right now and right here. So really snappy as well. There you go. And I'll try to get the focus the same, so there you go, so you can compare the background blur, the depth of field on each. Should be a little bit more blurry or wider or shallower on S26 Ultra. And let's go ahead and walk down the stairs so we can test the stabilization as we go through the pathway here as well. You can see the shadows and contrast that to the sunnier skies earlier. And I'll just try to jog to try to stress out the stabilization a bit. So there you go, a video test of the rear cameras on the S26 Ultra and last year's S25 Ultra. And we're back in the same scene, this time with log video enabled on each. This is the main cameras to start out here. And the differences are that log video is only available in Pro mode on the S25 Ultra, while you can enable log in the main camera, standard camera mode on the S26 Ultra, which allows you to change between the camera lenses. So on the S25, since it's in Pro mode, once you start recording in log video, you're locked into that camera lens. On the S26 Ultra, if you're using log on the main video app mode, then you can actually switch between your lenses like this. So right now on the S26, you can see ultra wide angle camera, main camera, I can go telephoto lenses, all of it. And I can even go into the max zoom here on the S26 Ultra. On the S25, all I can do is zoom in on the main lens, which gives you that amount of reach there. So I'll back that out on the S25 and on the S26. And then I'll just do the same thing. I'll walk down the stairs just to give you the same footage that you saw before in fully auto mode, so you can kind of see how this compares and what this all looks like here with log video that's been color graded. And what's also nice is that they each have color correction built in. So on the S25, you can quickly correct your color, but on the S26, you actually have preset LUTs, so you can select from different LUTs and color profiles to select from, and you can actually see that in real time while you're recording on S26. You can't do that on the S25, so minor differences there, but they both support some accessible color correction and color grading there on S26 and color correction, basic color correction on S25. So let me know what you think about this log video footage on each of these phones. So we're back with the rear cameras, this time with portrait video turned on. So you should be seeing this artificial background blur, and you're limited to 4K 30 frames per second in this mode, so no 60 frames per second recording with portrait video. And they're both on a scale of 0 to 7. They're both set to a 5, so you can adjust that up and down as you want. And I think on the S25 Ultra it's looking a little bit more blurred out on the background at the same setting for whatever reason, but just something to note there. And I'll just go ahead and pan around. So it's a bit of an overcast day, so you can see how this effect holds up with some of the slight lighting conditions shift, but no real intense sun to deal with today. And so if I pan this way, it'll be more directly behind me. If I pan down, it's kind of more directly in the camera. It's covered by some cloud cover. And I'll keep panning around so you can kind of see what this looks like here as it continues to slightly shift in lighting.
until we end up back to where we were. And I'll just start walking so we can test the stabilization and show you how this background effect holds up with some movement. So let me know what you think about portrait video here on the rear cameras of the S26 Ultra and S25 Ultra. So here's a test of the front-facing cameras on the Galaxy S26 Ultra and S25 Ultra. This is being recorded at 4K 60 frames per second, the max resolution and frame rate supported on each. And I'm outdoors here, so there's a good amount of wind. There's actually some background noise and some work going on behind me, so it's a good test of the microphones and how well they can cancel out that background noise. And so it's a bit overcast, so there's not a lot of direct intense sun, so this actually should be looking pretty good right now without too much the sunlight to deal with. But I'll just pan around anyway so you can see what this looks like in the lighting conditions as they change slightly here. And so you can see it now. The sun would be a little bit more directly behind me. You can see that right now. And if I pan down, you can see it more in the cameras, a little bit more of the cloudy skies there blocking it out, but still affects the exposure. And I'll keep going around so you can see what this looks like here and all the way back around to where we started. And I'll just start walking to test the stabilization and show you what that looks like here side by side. So let me know what you think about the front-facing camera footage here on the S26 Ultra and last year's S25 Ultra. So we're back with the front-facing cameras, this time at portrait video turned on each. And in this mode, you're limited to 4K 30 frames per second, so no 60 frames per second recording with portrait video. But you should be seeing this artificial background blur, and it's on a scale of 0 to 7. This is set at a 5 right now, and for whatever reason, the S25 Ultra looks a little bit more blurred out in the background at the same setting than the S26 Ultra. But I'll go ahead and pan around so you can see how this effect holds up with some of the changing lighting conditions. Although again, not super intense sunlight. And of course, there's still some background noise, the wind and some of that work going on. So not sure how much of that you can hear, but that might be a good test of the microphones here. And so now the sun is more directly behind me and you can see right there in the sky, blocked out by some of the cloud coverage. But we'll keep going around and we'll end up where we started. And I'll walk again to show you the stabilization and how this background effect holds up with some movement. So let me know what you think about portrait video here on the front-facing cameras on the S26 Ultra and last year's S25 Ultra.
So here's a low light video of the rear cameras of the Galaxy S26 Ultra and S25 Ultra. We're starting with the ultra wide angle cameras on each at 4K 60 frames per second. So again, these are the ultra wide angle cameras, and I'm just going to pan around to give you a side-by-side view of how these ultra wide angle cameras compare in this particular setting. And these are smaller sensors, so they'll let in less light, so it'll be a little bit darker. So when we switch into the main camera right now on the S26 Ultra and the S25 Ultra, you can see everything brighten up, especially when I pan up here. And I'll just go ahead and do the same thing. I'll just pan around to give you a side-by-side view of the main cameras and how they look in this same spot and scene. A lot brighter, larger sensors let in more light. And we can test out the telephoto cameras and the zoom on those signs. So 3x telephoto here on the S26 Ultra, again smaller sensor, so it got darker. Same thing on the S25 Ultra. And now we can try out the 5x telephoto on the S26. And the same 5x telephoto here on the S25. A little bit brighter because they're slightly larger sensors than the 3x, but still a little bit dimmer compared to the main sensor. And we can go all the way into the max 25x there on the S26, and we can go max 20 on the S25 Ultra. So a little bit less reach on the S25, but that's how they compare here. We'll back them both out on the S25 and the S26, and we'll just pan around. And we'll just start walking so we can test the stabilization, as well as show you what these cameras look like in a little bit less light. That was some pretty bright light out there. And as we walk out this way, a little darker, but looks like that really bright light around the corner is on this time. So things are going to get a little bit brighter as you round the corner. You can see what that looks like and how these cameras handle that really bright light in the pathway there. You can see it brightening everything up, and these cameras probably try to brighten things up a little bit more than they really are. But as we go down this way, it's a little bit darker. This is a darker alleyway, but of course illuminated by that really bright light off my right and some of these pathway lights down the stretch here. But we'll pan up into the building, which has some lights of its own, and up into the night sky where there is light pollution, but it's fairly darker because it's 60 frames per second. So not too bad, not too much noise there in that sky. And we'll pan all the way back this way. You can see the clouds up there and how all this looks. So let me know what you think about the low light footage here. 4K 60 frames per second from the S26 Ultra and the S25 Ultra. Alright, so we're back in the same scene, this time at 4K 30 frames per second. So things should be looking slightly brighter here with 30 frames instead of the 60 frames. So just a quick clip here. I'll go back in reverse order of how we went with the 60 frames, but just to give you a view of how this looks. So that was a little bit brighter over there, a little bit brighter in the night sky. You can see a little bit more of the clouds, a little bit more of the noise pollution because it gets a little brighter. And we'll just walk back the way we came, and you can kind of see things in reverse order. See if you notice any differences here at 30 frames other than the motion. It should be looking brighter. And then I think it'll also look brighter, especially when you get to the smaller sensors like the ultra wide angle camera as well as the telephoto sensors. But these main cameras let in a lot of light anyway, and it was probably a little bit darker, but not as dramatic of a difference. But if we go here and we'll switch to the ultra wide angle camera here on the S26 and the S25 Ultra, so you can see there it's a little bit brighter than I think it was back at 60 frames per second. But we'll go ahead and try the telephoto lenses here, 3x on the S26 Ultra and on the S25 Ultra. Yeah, so smaller telephoto sensors, definitely looking brighter than they did at 60 frames. And then we'll go 5x here and 5x here, also brighter than it was before. And we'll go to max zoom, which should be looking brighter and clearer than it did at 60 frames. So there we go, and we'll back both these out. So just a quick comparison of 30 frames per second at 4K versus the 60 frames per second footage that you saw earlier. Let me know what you think.
Hey everyone, so here's a low light video test of the front facing cameras of the Galaxy S26 Ultra and the S25 Ultra. This is being recorded at 4K 60 frames per second, the max resolution and frame rate of these front facing cameras. And so I'll go ahead and do my usual low light test, and at the end I'll give you my thoughts on what I thought about the comparison, so stay tuned for that. But as I move over here, you can see how they look with that really bright street light behind me right there. And overall not too bad, flaring out a bit, but pretty much any camera will. And I'm in my similar testing spot where you got a bunch of lights around me, so this is pretty much some optimal conditions for these cameras to look as well as they can with some more dim conditions with a bunch of lights around me. But I'll just go ahead and start walking so I can show you the stabilization and what that looks like here side by side, as well as move over to an area with some slightly less light as I walk over here through this area. It's a little bit dimmer, as you can see here, especially as we move away from the lights right here. But I'll pull up and I will pan all the way around so I can show you several of those really bright lights behind me and how these front-facing cameras are handling it. Overall, pretty well, not blowing them out or flaring them out too badly, really. And we'll come back here into this dimmer area just so you can get a side-by-side view of what this looks like here with some less light here in this area. And it is a warmer color temperature lights around me, so it's going to look a little bit dingy, a little bit warmer color tone. Overall, not too bad from what I'm seeing in the viewfinder. And again, this is 60 frames per second. And so I'll come back with some 30 frames per second footage so you can see the differences. It should look a little bit brighter, probably better to use if you're shooting in low light. And I'll also come back with my final thoughts on the comparison. Alright, so we're back with the front-facing cameras, this time at 4K 30 frames per second. So things are looking brighter, at least in the viewfinder. So of course, every time in low light you want to shoot video, always shoot 30 frames per second. It'll look a little bit brighter, unless of course you want things looking darker like night. But for visibility, this is probably a little bit better. But I just want to quickly shoot and walk through the test so you can see what it looks like here at 30 frames per second compared to what you saw at 60 frames per second. So everything should be looking a lot brighter than it was before, even in this lower lit area here. And I'll still do the same thing. We'll pan all the way around so you can see how they handle that. Yeah, the lights are going to flare out some more. And everything looks a little bit brighter, right? So we'll come back to this area and we'll wrap this up with some thoughts. But do let me know what you thought about the camera comparison. Drop me a comment. But overall, for me, between the S26 and S25 Ultra, minor camera upgrades here. The image processing, especially if you're shooting in auto mode, looks pretty much identical to me. But of course, the difference is going to be the telephoto cameras. The main camera does have the slightly wider aperture. The 5x telephoto has the slightly wider aperture as well. But the difference that I noticed, because I like to take a lot of macro shots with the telephoto lenses, is that while you can still get fairly close to subjects on the S26 Ultra, you can't get as close as you can on the S25 Ultra. So even though the 5x telephoto lens on the S26 has a wider aperture, should have a shallower depth of field, you can get closer on the S25 and actually create a shallower depth of field look with the S25 Ultras, both 3 and 5x telephoto cameras like you saw earlier in the comparison. So if you like to take close-up macro shots, I still prefer the S25 because of that. But overall, I think if you're going to shoot in auto, it looks pretty much very similar. If you're going to take advantage of the pro features like log video, the S26 Ultra does have the APV codec, as well as being able to use log video outside of pro mode to give you more flexibility. So when you're using it in the standard camera app, switch to log video on, you can switch between all the lenses, so that gives you more flexibility while shooting, while capturing log video to color correct or color grade and post later, so you get that look that you're looking for. Whereas on the S25 Ultra, log video option is locked into its pro mode. Of course, you can use third-party camera apps like Blackmagic and everything else to unlock all that in a third-party app if you want to as well, but just something to note there. But overall, similar camera experience between the two. Let me know what you thought, if you saw any major differences, if you've got the S25 or S26, or you're looking to upgrade perhaps. Hopefully this helped you. But if you have any questions, comments, leave them down below. I'll always try to answer what I can. And as always, thanks for watching.